This is kind of a fun one today. I'm here with Joe Gansevles. Now, Joe is with the Patch. Now, Joe, I've written down what you are there. Your title is you're Coordinator of Urban Agriculture and Environmental Sustainability, correct?
That is correct, Glen.
Now, you and I got to meet one another at a press conference last week at the food bank for the Curb Hunger food drive, and you spoke quite passionately there about the Patch and what it is that you're endeavoring to do in this community, which is pretty vital, I think. So why don't you talk to us a bit about it? How did the Patch get started?
Of course. The Patch got started because there were a group of three members that wanted to start the Patch, those being Hutton House, the Nathan T. Deslett Fund, and the Kensington Village neighborhood. And we all had a common goal of bringing people together for food security.
Yeah. Something
that when we initially started it, we thought that it would be a goal that would meet the needs of our participants, would meet the needs of the Kensington Village neighborhood, and also meet the needs of the Nathan T. Deslett Fund, which is a memorial fund.
And when was that?
Well, we had our first conversation about 7 years ago. We, however, started the project in 2020. It started on a smaller scale. It was we received a smaller grant from the London Community Foundation to assist with food security during the crisis.
Yeah, and so that's actually happening during the pandemic as you're just getting going. How was that? Because the community itself was no longer definable in its own historic terms, the way that it used to be. You know, you're having to respond to a community that's really under challenge during a pandemic. How did that part of it work for you?
Well, I think that, the times were stressful and they were a real struggle. But I think that as it put us in a situation where our ability to help and to have that grant to help, it couldn't have happened, I guess, at a more needed time for our participants. We deal with, some struggles, barriers, and disabilities, including anxiety and agoraphobia, mobility challenges. So for people to even go out to the grocery store, to wait in lines, to even get to the grocery store through paratransit, we saw people reaching out to us, and we had a partnership with Meals on Wheels, and we were actually delivering food, but we weren't positioned to be able to assist in the independence of food security prior to this grant. So we started very quickly. Actually, in the office that I'm in right now, we started growing food with aeroponic towers. So wow. The timing was definitely, it was very, it was, I guess, the perfect time in a very unfortunate time. So
yeah. I mean, for us as a food bank, I think for everybody it was kind of the same. For many, they kind of had to shut down or limit operations because of the pandemic. But I think for others, like the food banker, like yourself, there was kind of a pause put on everything. And it allowed you actually a bit of creative space to figure out what it is that you wanted to do. So I know for us as a food bank, for instance, the greenhouse that we built was more or less a pandemic creation. Right? In that pause period, we announced that we were going to do it, and we did it, and we announced a number of other things too, neighborhood depots, all of those kind of things that I think would have been a lot more difficult if the pandemic had not been on. There would have been all these other groups, all these other things that were happening. It would have made it hard to kind of shape and form. But because of the pandemic, we were able to do that. I know you had limitations as a result of the pandemic, but certainly the creative process must have been pretty interesting during that time.
It was really, I think that what was really outstanding for us was the buy-in from some of our partners, for instance, the City of London, to see our creative and to see that, we were going to take a storage yard and we were going to grow food in the storage yard, and we were going to build the beds out of pallets. To have people transition so quickly to see something that maybe prior to the pandemic would have been, oh, that sounds interesting, but to see it actually, be put together and to have that community buy-in in something that was, very, I think, creative and maybe a little bit abstract prior to the pandemic.
Yeah. So describe to me what it was like for you as the pandemic started to wane and more opportunities began to emerge out there. How did you navigate that as the Patch, as your group of volunteers and staffers? How did you do that?
Well, I think that it was really interesting because there was this very small dedicated group of us that, for the most part, prior to us building the Cavendish Community Food Hub, were in this office with these aeroponic towers. And then, we received notification of our larger grant, the Community Vitality Grant, and that we had all of a sudden, I think we have maybe 1,500 square feet in here, and then we had a third of an acre in Cavendish. And we were going to build these beds. We were going to build this farm. The price of wood, for instance, was something that put our goals out of our reach. We were able to get help from 3M. 3M were a huge help to us. They gave us 527 pallets. People came for so many reasons, came because they believed in assisting with food security. They believed in helping people return to maybe social norms. There was, I think, a deeper investment in fellow Londoners. So it really, it was very quiet. We were doing our thing here, and then all of a sudden it just got really big in such a good way. For somebody that worked in a fairly small team, it taught me to exercise some new skills as far as assisting in holding this bigger vision. And so there was a learning curve on my part. Hutton House had a learning curve because this is a new area, urban agriculture and food security for us. So, but we've made it through, and it's starting to feel now more like this is a part of the community. It's a part of Hutton House and Kensington Village and the Nathan T. Deslett Fund. So it feels like we've got maybe more of a resource library in what we're doing now.
It's pretty amazing what you're doing, but I'm wondering, if I drove out to see you this morning and we were doing this as a live interview and I came out to the Patch, describe it. What would I see?
Sure. I think the first thing you would see is we have 15 raised beds that are approximately 12 feet by about 5 feet in length. There's beds that line the whole fence. It's in a former storage yard that we've leased from the City of London. So there's chain link fence all around it. We do have some veggies growing right now. There's a trailer that is our office, not the office I'm in today, but we can't. We're sitting on a former landfill site, so we couldn't disrupt the ground. Everything is raised and accessible so that anybody that uses a mobility device would be able to garden. There's a deck with a piano. We deeply value music and what it does for people, for the heart, and it seems that gardening and that piano seem to go very well together. So I would think that it would be a place that it really brings joy to people. I think that it's very much, it's very much a working place, but it's also a place that people really come and just enjoy being at.
Yeah. One of the things we have in common in our organization is the Food Bank and the Patch is we are on a former landfill site as well. And what's interesting about it is back when I was a firefighter, we had these houses in that area that just started to blow up. And we were called out to them and they were exploding. And it was because of all of this methane gas and things like that that were coming out from that area. So it was amazing. We pulled up and we watched this house blow up and then this house blow up. And I mean, it was a major thing. I'd only been on the job, I think, a year. So this would have been back in the late 70s. But what they discovered was if they vented it and did it properly, that land could be usable for other things. And what ended up happening was Trudel Medical built their building there. On top of that, which is interesting, they couldn't dig down, they couldn't do just the stuff that you've been describing, but they could build up from that area. So when we built the greenhouse, for instance, it had to be a hoop house because we couldn't dig down because it had been former landfill. So much like you, we had these raised beds, so on and so forth. But what seemed to be a limitation when we first looked at it actually became an opportunity. We were able to figure out new and different ways to try to grow food and do other things, even despite some of the strictures that had been placed upon that particular piece of land. And it sounds to me like you've done the same thing. You came into it with that knowledge, and so you built up. You did the raised beds and other things, correct?
Absolutely. And it's in some ways very similar. Those limitations helped us find structure to build what we needed to build to meet the needs of people that come to the space.
Yeah. So do you see yourselves ultimately as you move forward, and we'll talk more about that towards the end, but do you see yourself as kind of a neighborhood local response, or do you see yourself as kind of a placeholder that people can look at and see it as something larger that the city could benefit from?
Quite honestly, when we started, we saw this as a neighborhood space, and it was envisioned pre-pandemic, and that changed everything. And I think that that our partners, the hard work that was put into it to help it grow, the response from the community, and then most importantly, with the need of the community, that I think that this has definitely moved beyond being one neighborhood space. I think that it's a blueprint that definitely not that we have to hold, but a blueprint that the city could utilize, other cities could utilize to find good use for space to help people achieve food security.
That was really my sense. At the press conference last week, you spoke, and it was great. But, listening to you, I realized that this is the model. These are the kind of things that we need to look at in the city as we look at urban agriculture. And it's not just about feeding hungry families. It really is about us getting back to the land, learning nutritious ways in which we can develop different kinds of food systems that are affordable and accessible. But it seems to me that what you have done is too good an idea to be limited to one particular neighborhood.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Let me ask you a question. It was said out there at that press conference that the answer to food insecurity is food security. Now, that would seem fairly normal, and yet people don't talk about that a lot much. When it comes to looking at vulnerable Londoners, families, individuals, children, as you look at them and you think, okay, these folks are living without the food supplies that they need, so you develop a food bank or other things to try to help those people. And it seems like you're giving those people who are food insecure food security. But it's not, is it? Like it helps in that moment. But really, for food security to really work, they would have to have food that was accessible, that was nearby, that was affordable, that was fresh, that was nutritious, that was environmentally minded, was sustainable, those kind of supplies. And it seems to me as we now move on in this area of urban agriculture, all of us in London, but especially with the leadership of folks like you, we need to be reminded that, helping the most vulnerable is really important. How we do it, however, is more important. So if the way that you're going to do that is with a food bank and donations and people give, that's a very productive, innovative way of doing things. But we've now been doing it for 4 decades. and the problems are getting worse. We know the price of groceries now, so on and so forth. I mean, really, that model is as important as it has been and has got a lot of Londoners involved with it. It has not necessarily provided food security for the whole community. Local food is still maybe hard to access. It maybe still is expensive. Maybe we're still way too dependent on grocery stores and other things. How do you respond to that? Like, do you see food security as the same way, or do you see it as something that's more minimized than that?
It's a great question. And I think that the answer to food security is knowledge. I think that looking, and knowledge comes, I think knowledge comes at a price. It comes at a price for the people that hold the knowledge. It comes at, their time, doing what we do. If we don't share the knowledge, then it's only there as long as we're there. So the knowledge has to be shared for food security. The space has to be shared. I think that looking at the food bank, there, from when the food bank started, there was the tone is selflessness, and that it takes time for people to care and to give. And I think that knowledge is shared at its best when people are being selfless and offering that with nothing better than wanting to have neighbors that are cared for, respected, and are knowledgeable. And I think that having spaces like the Patch within the city, within the province, within the country, where people can go and they can learn how to grow their own food in minimal space is something, we've had workshops growing in jars. We've had workshops growing on balconies, of course, growing the beds. Growing food wherever we can grow food in sharing that knowledge. I think that those types of situations are so important to people, because this is not knowledge that that we want to just hold and teach. It's knowledge that we want to give to fellow Londoners.
Yeah. Sometimes, though, knowledge comes up against expediency, right? And I think that that's what we've had in these last number of decades. I remember when I was a kid growing up in Calgary, or even in Scotland, we had our own little garden and we grew our vegetables, so on and so forth. But as the decades went on and the middle class grew and flourished as trade and other things and transportation, all of those kind of communications, as those things began to envelop the world and cross all over the world, food began to do the same thing. And so suddenly, with this knowledge that I think we had, especially during times like the Depression or the war, with victory gardens and things like that, right? I think that those things that were so great were work. But we had the knowledge. It was instinctive. It was within us, and we knew what to do. But then came the ease of going down and getting everything I want, putting it in a grocery store, bringing it home, and having first of all, an ice box, but then a fridge, and then a freezer that's on top of the fridge, right? We go along with that, and that became a system. That became the default system for decades. But it's temporary. And I think that's important. Like the last thing, when food banks first started, they were supposed to be temporary as well. This is 40 years ago, in the late 80s. They were supposed to be temporary, and now they kind of became permanent for a while. But now we're all looking at it and realizing, okay, these things have served their purpose, and they will probably continue on in one fashion or another. But the default has to shift from then to the land, to knowledge, to people getting back again, not just planting or growing of their own, but also in working with the farmers regionally and markets, all of those kind of things. It seems to me that you're in that sweet spot, that although you just started in 2000, you're in that spot where people are moving from that one easier, expedient default to something that might take a little bit of work, but actually has a lot of gratification in it, but is also more sustainable in community. Do you see it that way?
I do. I think that, and as somebody that I grew up with my family. I grew up around the larger scale farms outside of the city. I do see things changing, and I do see food systems changing. I do see the concept of, what is a farm gate sale, whether it's at the end of a driveway in Old South, or whether it's, in Park Hill. I see these types of things changing and hopefully changing for the better. I think that, we have to look at the way we live, and, that most people now are urbanists, and we have to look at how to be responsible and address people having access to healthy food.
Yeah, I really agree with you. But there's something natural about it and something wholesome about it that, you can go ahead and talk about grocery stores and there'll be endless division of opinions. That's true about food banks as well. Or you can talk about just growing in the land, and there's little criticism about that, right? I mean, people understand that that's a natural byproduct of being human and with our history, so on and so forth. So I really agree with you on that. Can I ask you another question, Joe, because you'll have expertise on this? I mean, I really appreciate the patch and all that is going on there. There are a number of groups that have started up in this last, say, decade that are trying to lead Londoners to that. I could name them, but I think people know who they are. Many of them have been on this show. I think those voices are very, very important. But are they a voice? So what I'm saying is each gets its funding, each has its own management style or model, each are reaching out to the different regions of the city or what we're doing. How do you see those voices coming together to make a main voice? Because I think that there are people who live in a local neighborhood who are so thankful that the patch is there and can get help. But we're trying to win the battle for food security, not just in one area. How do you see those groups all coming together? That would include the food bank to a certain degree. How do you view that? Because that's going to have to happen as we move forward.
It is, and there are, I think that we are fortunate in this city that there are, real trailblazers in urban agriculture. Mm-hmm. People that have organizations that have set precedents, organizations like us that, have worked with the communities that we work with. And I think that, structure's always important, talking. I think that where we in the urban agriculture community is something that we need to address is that we need to be collaborative and we need to share knowledge. Yeah. And we need Londoners to be aware, regardless of what part of the city they're in. I think that you look at people that live in the core and they're fairly savvy about urban agriculture, but I don't know that it's the same way across the city. And I would think that we may be too good of a little secret, some of these urban agriculture programs, and they belong all over the city. And we're very well represented, I think, along the Thames Valley Parkway, but I think that there's a space for them right across the city, new development, old development. And we need to share this and we need to champion each other. And we're really proud of some of the members of all of the members of the urban agriculture community, but we definitely need to champion more and be louder in our approach in doing that.
Yeah, so collaboration is important. I think that's really right. But I remember 10 years ago, the foundation and the food bank and the health unit and the city came together to help to fund and start the Food Policy Council. Each of us had our own different groups that we were trying to reach out to and do it. We saw the need to have one venue where food itself could be seen not just in emergency supplies, but as an important ingredient of its own in the forest city. And we needed people that could do research and publicize, educate, so on and so forth. Do you see something like that as being necessary for all of us as groups to be able to come together to have that kind of one umbrella piece, or do you think it's just going to be through collaborating more?
I think that organizations always need a starting point. And I think that when you go into a group to help champion one another, that you will stand for a while, I think, on your expertise, but then you'll learn from one another. Yeah. And I think that the openness to learning from other organizations and to sharing what you have helps organizations grow to be a more holistic organization, and also lend themselves to being part of a more holistic movement, a whole movement that helps people. So being able to shake who you are a little bit out of your head's a good thing, but also coming into something and having something to offer is very important.
But resources are important too. And I remember back then we did the food assessment. Now that was tens of thousands of dollars to get that produced over the course of a year, and then we released it. I remember it in a press conference. But what we saw was, if we are going to go ahead and do exactly what you're saying, make it more ingrained into our public and cultural life here in London, we really actually need data to know how that's to be done. So we can go ahead and grow, but at the same time, people can be throwing out more food than they ever have before. That's counterproductive and doesn't lead to what we're looking for. So this food assessment provided a lot of that. How much is being thrown out? Where's our food coming from? All of those kind of things. And I do believe that resources are key. And that's where groups, I think the larger groups, like the food bank or the health unit, the community foundation, as they have with you, or the city, need to use their clout to help these groups who are really at the front lines doing this stuff, to have the resources to show, this is a much bigger picture than just what we're doing. And it seems to me that you folks need that kind of support from people like us, who perhaps have resources but not your expertise. And somehow we need to bring all that together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's true. So if I wanted to donate to the patch or volunteer with you, how do I go about that, Joe?
Of course. So I would like to think that our website, www.patchlondon.ca, it would probably be the best way for people to find out information about how to connect with us for donations. We also have an open volunteer night every Tuesday, with the exception of tomorrow, the 13th, because of rain. Between 4 till 7:30. So that would be our open volunteer night. People can volunteer their expertise, their interests by connecting with us there's also a volunteer recruitment link as well.
Yeah. Are you present at events? Like different things are going around maybe in your neighborhood or in the community, or more or less people will learn about you by coming there?
I think we all have a lot of loo time around here, because we've been trying to go to every event that will have us to talk about this program. So.
Well, that's good. Well, listen, Joe, I happen to think that, I know a lot of the different folks at the Patch, and I know that it was a delight for us to share in the press conference of last week with the city and with some other partners. But we need to keep talking, as we're doing here, not just about it. Well, here's what we do as a food bank, or here's what we do as a Patch, but what do we need to do as a community to form this new kind of future? And I sense just from talking to you, you have that capacity, and the Patch has that capacity to think bigger, but also to collaborate at that level to bring those kind of things about. We probably need to talk again as this show goes on, but I think we really appreciate what the Patch has done. We appreciate it. I know the city appreciated your help at the press conference last week. But as you move forward, I'm sure more opportunities are going to come your way. And at that point, then there will be more opportunities, therefore, for us as a community to support you at whatever capacity that is. So keep us informed. If you have something new that's coming along that you're going to need resources on, let us know, Joe, because it's getting to be quite obvious that you're a real treasure in the community. And it can only grow. There's just no way that the urban agriculture movement is now going to shrink. Circumstances have stripped us of all of that expediency stuff. And we're all going to have to start working and thinking and becoming more knowledgeable. So thanks for this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for everything, Glenn.
That was great. Thanks.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.